Welcome to Spiritual Calisthenics. Today, on February 17th, we are celebrating the 16th week of Luke. And let us go into the Gospel according to St. Mark, chapter 12, verses 13 through 17. At that time, the chief priests and scribes sent to Jesus some of the Pharisees and some of the Herodians to entrap him in his talk. And they came and said to him, "Teacher, we know that you are true and care for no man, for you do not regard the position of men, but truly teach the way of God." Now, of course, they're trying to butter up Jesus Christ with this idea of no one can sway you, no one can do these things, but it's kind of a double-edged insult. In other words, you have no regard for us and our customs and what we perceive as our position in law. So then they try to trip up Jesus in front of all these people to get him to say something revolutionary. So they ask him, "Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Should we pay them or should we not?" But knowing their hypocrisy, he said to them, "Why put me to the test? Bring me a coin and let me look at it." And they brought him one. And he said to them, "Whose likeness and inscription is this?" They said to him, "Caesar's." Jesus said to them, "Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." And they were amazed at him. Now, they were trying to get Jesus to be tripped up so that he would basically be guilty of insurrection against the empire. This would give them cause to have the Romans come and arrest him and put him to death. Because they know that the prophecy of the Christ is this idea of this leader, this king. And so they are trying to trip Jesus up. Now, what Jesus did is a beautiful entendre here. Because when he's saying, "Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's," in other words, it has his mark on it, so it belongs to him. The irony of this is that when emperors do this, they put their image on coinage. They put statues up. The reason why they do this is so that everyone around knows who they belong to. You are property of this person. You use my image on your currency. You look up to my statue in your town squares. And the reason why this is done is to show supremacy. Now, the funny thing about this here is when Jesus Christ says, "Whose likeness is this?" The ironic thing is that we are made in the image and likeness of God, as it says from Genesis. And so we have inside of us the mark of God on our face. That's a beautiful thing. And what it basically means is that we are that inscription. We are that coin. We are that statue. We are sent to show dominance of God in all of creation. We belong to God. And so when Jesus Christ is saying, "Render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar, and to God the things that are God's," he's essentially saying, you all belong to God. This currency, these trifling things, they're not what's important. God is what's important. So they don't even realize that Jesus Christ masterfully showed them that they are the mark. They are to be rendered unto God. Now, this rendering is very, very important because we look to the accompanying epistle from the Universal Letter of St. Peter, chapter 2, 21 through 25, and 3, 1 through 9. "Beloved, Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his steps." Now, this is very important because when we talk about leaders, the reality is that leaders are those that are willing to do what they say for you to do. They lead by example. They are not doing something saying, "I want you to do something, but I'm not going to do the same." He committed no sin. So when Jesus Christ asks us to commit no sin, he didn't commit a sin. No guile, in other words, no deception was found on his lips. He asked you to be honest. He was honest. When he was reviled, he did not revile in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but he trusted to him who judges justly. In other words, God the Father. He himself bore our sins in his body on the tree, that we might die to sin and live to righteousness. In other words, because he made himself the sacrificial lamb, he took all of our sins unto himself, so that no other suffering, no other sacrifice should ever have to be made again. He took it on himself. That's the level of leadership, the servant leadership that Christ gives us. By his wounds you have been healed, for you were straying like sheep, but have now returned to the shepherd and guardian of your souls. By him dying on the cross, he brought us all back into him. Now, St. Peter is going to say some things that seem controversial, but we have to look at the deeper context here. Likewise, you wives, be submissive to your husbands, so that some, though they do not obey the word, may be won without a word by the behavior of their wives, when they see your reverent and chaste behavior. Let not yours be the outward adorning with braiding of hair, decoration of gold, and wearing of fine clothing, but let it be the hidden person of the heart, with the imperishable jewel of a gentle and quiet spirit, which in God's sight is very precious. So in other words, what is St. Peter talking about here? He's talking about the idea that women that try to decorate themselves with perfumes, with hair, with jewelry, they're trying to entice, they're trying to have an effect. And what St. Peter is saying, the greater effect that you will have on a man is not by trying to entice him with your outward beauty and with items or with the flesh, but rather the inward being. Impress him with the inner beauty that is in you, with your strength of character, of who you really are. That is how you should move his soul. So that even if he is not a firm believer, even if he is on the fence about a faithful life, he can be inspired by your action, by your belief, by your radiance inside. So once the holy women who hoped in God used to adorn themselves and were submissive to their husbands, as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord. And you are now her children, if you do right, and let nothing terrify you. Now, we have to be very, very careful as we read this, because St. Peter is not suggesting to women to be in abusive relationships. And he is not suggesting that women are supposed to be dominated by their husbands calling them Lord. Lord of the house is what we're talking about here, not Lord over you as in somehow you are a slave to the man, because, again, you are co-heirs. And he goes, as we go a little deeper, he talks about that when he's talking to husbands, about the idea that there is equality in the household. To be submissive in this may means to say that, you're equals, first among equals, but you're still equals. What he is saying here is that these women, these holy women, when we're talking about Sarah, when we're talking about Rebecca, when we're talking about Elizabeth, we're talking about people that were holy, were good. And it wasn't about their outward beauty that convinced their husbands to do the right things. It was their character, who they were on the inside, that truly mattered. And so he says that you are children of Sarah. In other words, the same way that we say sons of Abraham, children of faith. Children of faith, in the same way being daughters of Sarah, means that you are people of faith. And to let nothing terrify you means that you should not feel cowed down. You should not be submissive in this regard. You should be willing to stand up for your faith, to be righteous, to be good, to not let anyone try to push you down into a life that is not holy or good or one that you can be proud of. He continues by saying, likewise, husbands, live considerately with your wives, bestowing honor on the woman as the weaker sex, since you are joint heirs of the grace of life, in order that your prayers may not be hindered. In other words, a woman's physical body is weaker than a man. It is a man's duty to protect them physically. But bestow honor on the woman. What does honor mean? It means to uplift. It means to show them as they are above. To be subservient, to say, I will give you honor. I will not lord over you. I will not demean you. Since you are joint heirs of the grace of life, in order that your prayers may not be hindered. In other words, if you behave in such a way that you are lording over a woman in such a way as to try to make yourself seem above her or or abusive, then your prayers have no effect. They're hindered. They will not reach God, and you will not have salvation. So to be a true husband means to rule with your wife, to uplift your wife, giving her honor. So in other words, servant leadership, the two submitting to one another, walking together as co-equals, each with their roles, but equals. Finally, all of you have unity in spirit, sympathy, love of the brethren, a tender heart, and a humble mind. Do not return evil for evil or reviling for reviling, but on the contrary, bless, for to this you have been called, that you may obtain a blessing. In other words, when we live that Christian life, we receive blessings, and God strengthens us. I hope that you've enjoyed today's Spiritual Calisthenics. Have a blessed and wonderful day.